All right, so today I'm going to do a 16 by 20 inch alla prima oil painting. I'm going to be working on a 16 by 20 inch stretched canvas, and this scene is an alpine scene from the Sierra Nevada mountains here in California. Okay, so here's the image I'm going to be working from, and I shot this image about 10 years ago in the high Sierra. It's about 10,000 feet, and it's near Silver Lake, which is near Kirkwood, California. And the thing that attracted me to this scene is where the dark tree is reflected in the water. You can see down to the bottom. So I like the reflections, and then I also like the transparency of the water. You'll notice in the areas where the water is reflecting sky, you can also see to the bottom. It's just, it's a little bit more faint. You can't see it quite as clearly. But anyway, that's the area that really attracted me to this, that transparent water. I'm going to try to capture that effect. Now some challenges or some problems. Number one, the log going off to the right-hand side there, the fallen tree. It kind of runs off the canvas. It's a straight line. That's kind of an issue. There are a few branches there to slow the eye down. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle that. May reduce the size of the tree. I'm not sure. That's problem number one. Number two, the upper left quadrant of this image, the trees, it's kind of this green jumble. There doesn't seem to be any real interesting pattern there. I'm not quite sure I'm going to handle that. And then the last challenge I see is that, the green of the trees in that upper left-hand quadrant are sort of similar in value and color to the trees in the distance. That's not a real big problem. I will make the trees in the distance cooler and a little bit lighter, but those are some of the things I'm thinking about. Okay, so as usual, I am sketching in burnt sienna, and I'm just thinning the burnt sienna with a bit of odorless mineral spirits. And, I'm mapping out the big shapes, but also the sketching process for me is a way to get familiar with the subject. When you start sketching, you are really starting to look at, the image in an analytical way, starting to get into that process of seeing where the big shapes are. So, when I watch this, I'm leaving this in real time, by the way. The sketch took about 1 minute and 15 seconds. Leaving it in real time, you'll see that I'm kind of repeating over the same lines. I think this is just the process of getting familiar with the subject. All right, so that's really all I need to get started. Just a few basic lines to indicate where things are, and then I'm going to start working dark to light, and I'm just going to rough everything in. This whole area here is, I don't know how I'm going to sort this out. Maybe I won't sort it out at all. Maybe I'll just kind of just reproduce what I see and then look for interesting patterns to accentuate. But again, my main focus is going to be the water in this area, trying to get that reflection and, the transparency of the water, the sense of depth. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm working dark to light, and I'm using my typical dark mixture, which is a mixture of alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue. I've thinned the mixture with a bit of odorless mineral spirits, and I'm using a number 8 natural bristle brush, and I'm scrubbing the colors into the canvas. And the goal here is to cover the entire canvas with approximate colors and values. It's necessary to do that before I can start fine-tuning things. This will also give me just a rough idea of the composition. And already I can tell just by where the shapes are and everything, I like the feel of it. So then I can continue on starting to refine the colors. Okay, so there was a lot of noise in the background, but I want to include some real-time clips of me painting here. Yeah, my dad was over running the saws and making birdhouses outdoors. And then Emma, my daughter, called, and I was on the phone with her, which is not uncommon. In fact, I'll leave a little clip of actual conversation later, just so you can see what that's all about. But that's very typical. There's a lot going on in my environment. Anyway, so we'll hang out here with the voiceover, and I'll kind of explain what I'm doing. I At this point, I'm just sort of gently feeling my way into this because, as I mentioned, that whole section with the trees, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I figured, okay, at first, what I'll do is I'll start by looking for the dark sections of the trunks. And as I mentioned before, the whole process of sketching is one of getting familiar with the subject. In a way, that's what I'm doing right here too. I'm just kind of trying different things and trying to, like, at this point now into that reflection there's, quite obviously a dark reflected section of trunk, so I'm doing that. I'm just tackling some of the obvious things, working dark to light again, reinforcing some of the darks. And I'm using the same mixture here too, alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue, leaning this mix a little bit closer to blue though. As you can see, the previous mix was more towards red, which serves as a nice complement for the greens of the trees. And there may be some of that left in the final painting, hopefully. So yeah, like I said, I'm taking my time here and just kind of experimenting, really, and putting in the branches. One time, like a lot of times when you include the branches, it really does add a lot. And I'll come over those with, the foliage, whatever the pine needles or whatever foliage the trees have. But sometimes I find it really helpful to suggest the structure of the tree, like all the branches and everything. And then when you paint over them, there's a more natural feel, if that makes sense. Because basically that's how it works. The foliage are covering the branches. So if you put the branches in and then you cover them, it looks kind of natural. But again, I'm looking for, just little traces of those branches and just experimenting. I'm not trying to be exact, regarding the subject matter. Also, what I'm doing is I'm rolling back in my chair and, every few minutes and taking a look at the overall effect that I'm getting, looking at the overall composition. And I haven't started working on, putting the rocks on the bottom. At first I'm going to just get the shape of that reflected tree. And then, then I'm going to start putting the rocks in. You can see they're kind of like a warmer color, almost a yellowish, on the bottom, on the bottom of the lake. All right, so we'll do a little time lapse here. So I'm starting to experiment with the edges. Oh, here we go. Okay, now I'm putting the stones in. Now what's weird is it kind of looks like it's working a little bit, but when I was painting it, and that's why I'm speeding it up, I really had a hard time. I kept rolling back in the chair, and I'd walk like 15 feet. I'd walk into my dining room and look at it, and it didn't seem like it was working. I was kind of losing hope at one point, and honestly, I almost gave up this painting on multiple occasions, and I said, just keep going. I darken the rocks, and and then I'd lighten or I'd darken the area around the rocks, then lighten the rocks. Anyway, all right, so now we're going to go into a little real-time section with my daughter on the phone. Believe me, I've done this many times that we've been on the phone, and because my painting process is so long that I don't know what I'm doing, so. Well, I'm kind of experimenting with, like, most paintings are that way. I just keep experimenting until I get the effect I'm after, but a lot of time it doesn't happen right away. So if I'm making a video and I'm like correcting things, or I'm like, oh, that didn't work, let me try something else. There's this constant back and forth.
Right.
And I can't be including that. I can include some of it, which I think is good, to show that, that I don't just nail it on the first try, that part of it is all about experimenting.
Right.
So Emma lives in Los Angeles. We don't get to see each other very often, so we do hang out on the phone quite a bit. So I just thought I'd include that. I think I spent 4 hours on this painting, start to finish. But yeah, like I said, I got discouraged and I almost quit. And but I thought, you know what? Embrace the process and see if you can figure it out. So I kept going, and so let's take a look at the finished product. Okay, so I do feel like I got some good transparency in the water here, and then also a little bit over here as well. One thing that I noticed that helped was to kind of suggest just a little bit, you know, just suggest the rocks even in the lighter areas. And you can see some of the branches that are submerged are sort of suggested as well. Let's see. Also too, up in this area, the trees in this area, and I thought this was going to give me trouble. I kind of like it. Actually, I think it's fine. One thing I did add was I added water in the background here so you could kind of see through the trees. I like that, I think, a little better than having it all just solid. And then also, I noticed like up in the High Sierra there, the rocks and like fallen trees and even exposed branches get bleached white by the sun, or very, like a super light gray. And by suggesting some of those branches, I think it really, I think it added a lot actually. So yeah, I think these are kind of interesting. And then also I put a little bit more definition in the branches on this particular tree right here. As I mentioned before, I cooled off these trees in the distance. So as you notice, we've got, you know, some warm yellow greens right up front. Then it moves more to a reddish green and then to a bluish green. So I'm happy with the feeling of depth that I created. I don't think that that was really visible in the original photograph. So I think that really worked out. As far as the log goes, I think there needs to be more work. And like in here, this reflection, maybe I shouldn't be messing with this now, but that looks a little bit better. You know, it's because the log is being reflected in the water. And I might fix these branches too. I also might reduce the size of it, not sure. So I'm gonna live with it, but overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. I like it. It has a nice feel, so that's it. All right, so lately I've been trying to take my paintings to the next level, and what I've been doing is watching a lot of compilations on YouTube. Painters like Isaac Levitan and Fritz Thaulow is another one. And, you know, these are just compilations of like, you know, where they'll just scroll through anywhere from 200 to even 1,000 paintings. And I'll watch these every night before I go to bed typically. And I will pause on paintings that really, you know, that really impress me or I really connect with. And then I'll look at them carefully and try to figure out what's going on. Looking at these paintings has really made me want to push my work to the next level. And what I've realized is, in the past, you know, I work hard, but I was, you know, I love painting, so I was inspired to do it. But oftentimes when I'd get into a real sticky situation, I just think, okay, I'm not sure what to do here. I'll just solve this later or whatever, and I would give up. It's been years since I've done that because I realized you've got to push through the problems because typically you will not come back and solve them. So you know, now I really try to just push through. So this was kind of a rare situation where I felt like I almost gave up, and I was like, wow, that's been a long time. Is this gonna really be, am I gonna let this thing defeat me? But I kept going, and I'm glad that I did. I'm really happy with the product, and I feel like I learned. That's the important thing. So the things I learned in this, I can take to the next painting. Anyway, so hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. As usual, a big thanks to the support I get on Patreon. So my Patreon supporters, I really appreciate it. There's a link down below. And so if you want to help support this channel, keep me making these videos. I do include little informational videos on there. Oftentimes I'm in the studio and I'll get an idea that doesn't like, it's not a big enough idea to communicate on YouTube, but I will just share it with my Patreon audience. So I got a bunch of videos like that on there, and then also a supply list and some other things. So if you're interested, link in description. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.